We've all imagined traveling in time. What if the people you loved years ago could sit in your backyard once again?
In an extraordinary story that pushes the limits of what we know about time and space, a lone individual has appeared, claiming to have journeyed to the year 3906. What he encountered in that distant era goes beyond understanding, giving us a look into the future, a future where technology, society, and the very importance of existence have undergone incredible changes. So what does this world of 3906 look like, and what secrets lie ahead for humanity? Join us as we reveal the stories and mysteries of the future. Diary of Future Visions. At 1924, Paul Amadeus Dienach, a teacher of the German language in Greece, was struggling with tuberculosis. Despite his illness, he held a strong longing to return to his homeland in Switzerland. As his health worsened, he decided to entrust his extensive handwritten notes, spanning hundreds of pages, to his favorite student, Georgios Papahatsis. His intention was for Papahatsis to use these notes to aid him in his studies of the German language. Little did they know that this exchange would mark their final meeting. As Papahatsis began translating the notes, he stumbled upon unexpected content. The pages contained detailed passages discussing a prophesied nuclear conflict, the potential colonization of Mars, the idea of a global government, and insights into futuristic technologies such as flying vehicles, holographic displays, and even contact with extraterrestrial beings. Initially, Papahatsis dismissed these revelations as mere science fiction. However, as he delved deeper into the text, he gradually realized that what he had initially thought to be fictional stories were, in fact, entries from Dienach's diary. Within its pages lay a captivating account of visionary ideas and insights that transcended the bounds of an imagination. He recounted an extraordinary tale of his journey through time, detailing a remarkable experience that began in 1921 and unfolded in the distant future of 3906. It was a peculiar time slip where he spent an entire year in this distant era, carefully capturing every detail he encountered. The adventure commenced safely enough in May 1921, during one of Paul Dienach's routine instructional sessions in his college language class. Dienach, who had a history of health troubles, suddenly felt a wave of dizziness overcome him. This episode marked the onset of a series of events that would eventually lead to his hospitalization. As his condition worsened, he succumbed to a severe fever, which plunged him into irregular unconsciousness. During these trials, he experienced a strange feeling of being surrounded by unfamiliar individuals. However, his weakened state rendered him unable to effectively communicate with them. Upon regaining consciousness, he found himself in an unfamiliar hospital room, surrounded by people covered in unusual attire and talking in an unfamiliar language. Despite his efforts to communicate, which included recognizing fragments of English and Swedish, his attempts proved unsuccessful as none could comprehend his words. It wasn't until a doctor, recognizing his language, attempted to communicate with him in a broken form of German that some pretense of understanding began to emerge. Thus began his incredible journey through time, where he would traverse centuries and encounter civilizations far beyond his wildest imagination. The doctor introduced himself as Andreas Norum, a famous physics professor. He had been in an accident. He, feeling confused, admitted he didn't recognize the name Andreas Norum. To clear things up, he was shown a mirror, which reflected a face he didn't recognize. This discovery distressed him visibly. Tears welled up, and he had an emotional outburst. He struggled with the idea that he might be dead or experiencing a severe mental disturbance. In desperation, Dinnick claimed he was just a simple language teacher from Switzerland, expressing his bewilderment at what was happening. When Switzerland was mentioned, the medical staff reacted by asking about the current year. Confidently, Dinnick stated it was 1922. A heavy silence filled the room when the older physician stepped forward, revealing that the real year was 3906. Dinnick, skeptical and disbelieving, looked out of the window to see a surreal landscape with skyscrapers towering into the clouds and futuristic vehicles zooming around, defying gravity. Overwhelmed by this strange reality, he collapsed unconscious once again, a startling awakening. In 1922, Paul emerged from his second coma and relocated to Athens. During this period, he grappled with a pervasive heaviness in his chest, a burden that weighed heavily on him. Although Paul didn't explicitly articulate the source of his unease, as his illness progressed, he found himself contemplating the inevitability of his mortality. His writings, reflective of his deepening introspection, grew increasingly intricate. As Paul's condition worsened, he felt compelled to document his experiences during his second coma, the enigmatic state that had left him behaving peculiarly. Brace yourself, for the tale is about to take a thrilling turn, according to Paul, on what he deemed the initial day of his coma. He awoke in an unfamiliar room within the confines of a hospital. Despite his disorientation, he recognized his surroundings as a medical facility. Suffering from intense pain, though the exact location eluded him, Paul's thoughts remained clouded and his vision blurred. In attempting to convey his surroundings, Paul struggled to find adequate words, likening the scene outside his window to a picturesque countryside, yet unable to fully articulate its beauty. Over 12 days in the hospital, Paul's pain gradually subsided, allowing him to move about with limited mobility. Upon catching a glimpse of himself in the mirror, his head swathed in bandages, Paul's features remained obscured, adding to his sense of bewilderment and haziness. A few days later, after the nurses carefully removed the bandages from his head, Paul decided to take a look at himself in the mirror. He anticipated seeing some bruises or swelling, given his recent ordeal. However, what he saw left him utterly shocked. The face staring back at him was not his own. It belonged to a young man he didn't recognize. It felt like a scene straight out of a dream, but to him, it was all too real. He was so overwhelmed by the realization that he panicked, refusing to let anyone, not even the nurses, enter his room. For the following days, only 2 specific physicians attended to Paul's needs. Despite his attempts to communicate with them, he found himself unable to understand their language. This was particularly distressing for Paul, considering he was a language instructor himself. The language sounded vaguely familiar, with roots in Anglo-Saxon and some Scandinavian words, but it was largely unfamiliar to him. This only added to his bewilderment and anxiety. After a few days, Paul starts to feel more relaxed. He's permitted to stroll around the hospital, which is a new experience for him. Yet as he walks, he finds it hard to find the right words to describe what he sees. Everything seems so unusual, like he's stepped into a different world. One place catches his attention, what Paul calls the drawing room. It's like a waiting area, but to Paul it's unlike any waiting room he's ever seen. It's incredibly spacious, and all the furniture, from tables to chairs to picture frames, looks as though it's crafted from crystal. They shimmer and reflect light in mesmerizing pastel hues, creating a scene similar to a kaleidoscope. In this moment, Paul can't help but wonder if he's somehow ended up in heaven. However, his thoughts are interrupted by whispers from the doctors and nurses. Due to the language barrier, He can't grasp what they're saying, except for one name that keeps coming up. Andreas Northman. Suddenly it dawns on Paul. Andreas Northman is the person whose body he now inhabits. Gradually, the puzzle pieces start to fall into place for Paul as he begins to comprehend the situation he finds himself in. A surprising encounter and a mind shift. After 3 days of careful watching, Dinnick started showing signs of getting better. He became strong enough to walk around. He described his surroundings vividly, talking about walls made of crystal that gave him a wide view of the scenery. He also noticed objects made of warm, soft-colored, glowing metal. As he was guided through a hallway, he entered a big room where he met 2 wise-looking figures dressed in white robes. At first, he thought they might be priests or kings, but they were called electors, and one of them had an eye that seemed to hold great wisdom. Up until then, doctors had thought his experiences might be due to a head injury, and they didn't take seriously the idea that he might be from a different time. But when the electors asked him questions, they started to believe his incredible story. These electors knew about something rare called a consciousness shift, where a person's mind or soul could move into another person's body. In his situation, there was a lot of talk about what might have happened. They thought that during an accident with a guy named Andreas Northam, Dienach somehow ended up in his body. Northam had a moment where his body stopped working for about 15 minutes. Doctors did some intense stuff to bring him back, like cooling his brain and restarting his heart. This was a big moment. People guessed that it was during this time that Dienach's mind shifted into Northam's body, shooting him 2,000 years into the future. It's like his thoughts traveled through time and landed in Northam's body. This idea about minds not being stuck at one time is pretty wild. Enoch, who's really into this stuff, finds out that some folks believe everyone's minds exist all at once, throughout all of time and space. This rare thing happening, and it makes them call for help from a guy named Stefan. He knows the real Northam and is supposed to help him remember who he is. The plan is for him to live as Northam while Stefan teaches him about the world today. Stefan agrees to visit him every day to teach him about life now, but Dienach, who's been living in the future for a couple of weeks, is more interested in the past. Dino's futuristic journey and society's evolution. In the year 3906, doctors were puzzled by a curious occurrence. Despite their deep understanding of the human mind, a lingering mystery persisted from the 1920s. It revolved around Dienach, a man afflicted with encephalitis lethargica, a rare condition that plunged him into periods of deep sleep and impaired his ability to speak and move. What made his case even more fascinating was his seemingly paradoxical state. Despite being thrust 2 weeks ahead in time, he remained wide awake, defying sleep altogether. Instead of succumbing to the night, he immersed himself in the marvels of the future, hungrily absorbing knowledge through a remarkable device called the Regenschwager. This device, resembling a handheld gadget but far more advanced, illuminated the darkness with its glowing 3-dimensional images, accompanied by captivating sounds and narrations. It was a precursor to what we now know as the iPad. His nights were spent engrossed in reading, learning, and exploring the intricacies of this futuristic tool. However, his insatiable thirst for knowledge faced a constraint imposed by the doctors, a prohibition on studying historical events of the 20th century for fear of tampering with the timeline. Undeterred, he redirected his focus towards the challenging years ahead, spanning from 2000 to 2300. Through his diligent studies, he gained profound insights into the struggles of humanity, grappling with issues like overpopulation and regional conflicts. His vision extended far beyond Earth as he delved into the monumental achievement of colonizing Mars, a milestone reached after more than 6 decades of progress with a flourishing population of 20 million settlers. In the hanging of time and knowledge, he became a beacon of interest and resilience, navigating through the mysteries of the past and the possibilities of the future, all while challenging the boundaries of human understanding. In the year 2065, a terrible event struck Mars, causing the entire colony there to crumble and fall apart. Efforts to rebuild were made, but they eventually fizzled out. Then in 2309, a significant nuclear war tore through Europe, leaving destruction in its wake. Surprisingly, the Baltic and Scandinavian nations were left relatively intact. It's thought that this catastrophe influenced the development of their unique language, a blend of English and Scandinavian tongues. The global nuclear conflict that followed lasted a staggering 80 years, destroying much of humanity. But from the ashes of this destruction, something new arose. In 2396, a fresh world order occurred, known as Redst. This marked the end of an ancient era and the dawn of a new one. Initially, this government was tainted by corruption, with the wealthy holding sway. This sparked resistance across the globe, fueled by deep-seated nationalism. But as time passed, change took root. The system evolved, moving away from the election of traditional politicians and businessmen. Instead, those in positions of power were increasingly individuals from fields like science, philosophy, and humanitarianism. This shift signaled a turning point, steering society towards a brighter, more enlightened future. In the year 2023, a significant shift began to unfold in society, spearheaded by a prominent figure named Thorhild. Instead of clinging to the old ways of an economy dictated by scarcity, Thorhild introduced a groundbreaking idea centered around ensuring that everyone had enough. This new economic paradigm emphasized adequacy for all on a global scale. Under this system, people dedicated 40 years of their lives to contributing to the greater good in their chosen fields. After this period of service, they retired with all their basic needs taken care of by the global community. Thanks to remarkable advancements in technology and automation, by the time Paul Dinass entered the scene in 3906, individuals only needed to work for 2 years of their lives. The journey began with childhood education, preparing individuals for entry into the workforce at the age of 17. Following this, there were 2 intensive years of work before retirement. During retirement, all essential needs, including housing, food, clothing, education, and entertainment, were provided for. This new society did away with conventional money, instead placing a high value on art and science. Pursuing a career became optional, offering the possibility of a life of leisure as long as individuals fulfilled their 2 years of service. While some may draw parallels to socialism and communism, this system added an interesting twist to the narrative. The question arises, why do traditional systems like socialism and communism often fail? The answer lies in the inherent presence of selfish individuals. Despite the overall generosity of most people, there are always those driven by insatiable desires for more. This perpetual struggle against human nature adds depth to the story of societal evolution, the terrific evolution of humanity in the year 1306. Human nature often poses challenges, but by the year 3906, humanity had undergone a remarkable transformation. This change, however, wasn't what one might expect. Instead of the traditional notions of human identity, we have evolved into something entirely different. He delves into a fascinating phenomenon that emerged around 3000 AD, known as needlework or needlework in the future. This shift involved a significant evolution in the structure of the human brain, resulting in the emergence of a new sense organ. This extraordinary organ bestowed upon people the ability to perceive an entirely new dimension of existence and tap into vast reservoirs of spiritual wisdom, an ability referred to as oversin or supervision. The prospect of instant enlightenment sounds enticing. However, this newfound cognitive prowess didn't necessarily translate into boundless happiness and spiritual tranquility. Instead, it brought forth a profound sense of joy, acceptance of mortality, and a detachment from worldly concerns, all flooding into consciousness simultaneously. This transformation, while intriguing, challenges conventional ideas of fulfillment and contentment. Initially, there was a lot of fear among people when they first encountered the needlework. Those who went through it would be overwhelmed by its intensity and often didn't survive. However, on September 6th, a remarkable event occurred. A 76-year-old man named Alexis Fulke not only survived the needlework, but thrived afterward. This event marked a significant turning point. After Alexis Fulke's survival, everyone who underwent the needlework began to survive it. This shift in perception became quite common. This change eventually led to the evolution of Homo sapiens into a completely new species. This new species was called Homo occidentalis novus, or the New Western Man. In the future, human nature will undergo a profound transformation. Unlike present-day humans, who are primarily driven by survival instincts, competition, and individual success, the new species had different priorities. They were not solely focused on their survival at the expense of others. Instead, they embraced a more cooperative and interconnected way of life. In the land of 396, rules and regulations seem unnecessary. Here, people naturally work together for the greater good, a trait ingrained in their very being through evolution. Selfishness is seen as a relic of the past, belonging to less developed times. In this society, the idea of acting solely for one's benefit is unfathomable. Paul Dienach, an observer from another time, finds the inhabitants of this future world fascinating. He likens them to carefree children, unburdened by worries or fears. There's an undeniable allure to this innocence, a longing to return to a time when all needs were effortlessly met and life was devoid of envy or anxiety. Dienach's friend Stefan provides insight into their behavior. What some may perceive as strange or immature, Stefan suggests, could be seen as either childlike wonder or something divine and profound. However, he raises valid concerns about how these seemingly carefree individuals would handle external threats, especially encounters with extraterrestrial beings. Stefan, however, reassures him with tales of past interactions with aliens, emphasizing that such encounters have occurred multiple times without any negative repercussions. In this future era, humans are aware of the presence of intelligent beings both within their solar system and beyond. Yet they prefer to observe from a distance rather than engage directly. Stefan acknowledges instances where these extraterrestrial beings intervened, particularly during pivotal moments in human history. This detailed balance between interest and caution defines their approach to the unknown, offering a glimpse into a society where innocence and wisdom intertwine in fascinating ways, lost love and reawakened hope. When Paul Denk was a young man, he fell deeply in love with a girl named Anna from his village. Despite Anna reciprocating his feelings, her family insisted she marry someone else. One memorable day, they found themselves together on a picturesque hill covered in beautiful white buttercups. As they soaked in the scenery, Paul wished fervently that the moment would never end, sensing the impending loss of Anna from his life. Eventually, Anna suggested they return home, signaling the end of their time together. Before parting ways, Paul pleaded with Anna to promise that they would meet again. With a reassuring smile, Anna agreed, even planning to create a wreath of windflowers for their next encounter. Tragically, fate intervened, and Paul never saw Anna again. The pain of this loss lingered with him throughout his life, haunting his thoughts and dreams. He turned to prayer, desperately seeking signs of Anna's enduring love, but they never materialized. Years later, Paul found himself in a new chapter of his life, having spent time with the people of 3906. Here, he formed a connection with a woman named Sylvia. Opting for a day trip, they embarked on an adventure in a remarkable flying vehicle called Ayosa, capable of whisking them almost instantly to any destination on Earth. Paul, having formed a special bond with Syl during a different chapter of his life, decided to surprise her by visiting his old village, completely unaware of where fate would take them. As Sylvia and Paul wandered, they spent the day lost in conversation and discovery. Eventually, they found themselves standing atop the very hill where Paul and Anna, his past love, had shared countless meaningful moments years before. It was a place where windflowers danced around them, whispering tales of old memories. In a touching gesture, Sylvia fashioned a wreath out of the delicate windflowers. Then, unexpectedly, she turned to Paul and suggested they head back. Handing him the wreath, she asked him to place it on her head. This moment struck Paul deeply, like a sudden bolt of lightning, as he interpreted it as the sign he had been yearning for throughout his life. Later, when Paul recounted the day's events to his friend Stefan, they delved into deeper thoughts about the nature of time. Stefan proposed a thought-provoking idea. Could Sylvia possibly be the reincarnated soul of Anna, fulfilling a promise made over 2,000 years ago? That night, as Paul's eyelids grew heavy with exhaustion, he wondered if he would finally find the peace and rest he had been longing for after so many restless nights. Meanwhile, in a seemingly unrelated turn of events, Andreas Noram, a character from 1922, awoke from a year-long coma, marking the conclusion of this intricately woven and interconnected tale. The story of Paul Amadeus Dienach has stirred up quite a debate, leaving us pondering whether his tale holds truth or if it's merely a concocted story aimed at making money. One angle suggests that Dienach's account is rooted in reality, where he alleges to have encountered extraordinary occurrences that flew him 2,000 years ahead in time. In his hefty 300-page book, he meticulously lays out intricate details of people, locations, and timelines, delving into futuristic concepts such as cryonics, the internet, flying cars, teleportation, and something similar to a holographic experience. These vivid descriptions lend weight to his story. During his coma, Dienach was firmly convinced that he was experiencing actual reality, completely unaware that it was all a product of his vivid dreams. The possibility of dreaming while in a coma hinges on the state of one's brain, and if he indeed dreamt for a prolonged period, it could explain the richness of his envisioned future world. However, there's another perspective that suggests Paul Amadeus Dienach might be nothing more than a fictional character, and his entire existence could be a fabrication. This idea casts a doubt on the credibility of the narrative, prompting a closer examination of the events portrayed in his book, Mysterious Origins. Even though Paul Dienach's story hasn't become very popular, it's been getting some attention online through blogs, podcasts, and videos. What's interesting is that many of these outlets use a particular photo as the thumbnail. What they often don't mention is that this photo is a mugshot of Daniel Tohill, who was accused of theft in New Zealand back in 1908. Adding to the mystery, it's said that they supposedly lived in Zurich during the 1920s, not too long ago in history. But careful searches through city records from that time, both in Zurich and Athens, where they claimed to have been teaching, show no sign of anyone with that name or anything similar. Georgios Papahatsis, the translator and publisher of the story, tried to find more information about them in later years, but had no luck. He thought this difficulty might be because he allegedly served for Germany in World War I and then changed his name when he moved to neutral Switzerland, keeping his true identity hidden. So, even now, the real identity remains uncertain and mysterious. Adding to the mystery, the original handwritten diary that supposedly documented Dienach's remarkable adventures is now mysteriously missing, according to Papahatos. This disappearance occurred during the wartime period in Greece when the military searched his residence. The search led to the confiscation of his notes written in German. Sadly, these notes were never returned, raising suspicions about what exactly happened to them. The situation becomes even more intriguing when we consider the parallels between Dienach's story and Howard Phillips Lovecraft's works, particularly his tale, The Shadow Out of Time. In Lovecraft's story, written in a first-person diary format, the protagonist falls into a coma and wakes up at a different time. Similarly, Dienach's account places him in the future, while Lovecraft's character experiences temporal displacement into the past. He finds himself in the future. These similarities have not gone unnoticed, with some suggesting that his story might have been influenced by Lovecraft's work. What adds another layer of complexity to this mystery is that The Shadow Out of Time was published in 1936, raising questions about the timeline and casting doubt on the authenticity of his purported experiences. Was Dino truly experiencing these extraordinary events, or was his story a product of literary influence or fabrication? The missing diary and the eerie echoes of Lovecraft's narrative only deepen the interest surrounding his story. In the 1920s, when we look closely at all the little details, some people start to doubt if everything we've been told is true. This doubt leads them to wonder whether Dienach, the main character, is a real person, or if the whole story is just a big, made-up story. Georgios' father was a very respected law professor and thinker. He had a high position in Greece's Council of State, which is kind of like their Supreme Court. He knew a lot about laws, society, and human culture, showing that he was a serious and smart person. What's interesting is that the same themes he was interested in also show up in Paul Dienach's diary. It seems like Dienach's story might have been created by Papahatsis as a way to explore deep ideas about spirituality and humanity. The parts about time travel and romance could just be tricks he used to make the story more interesting, rather than trying to make people believe it's all real. But now, with the internet, things get complicated. Stories can spread so fast, and it's hard to know what's true and what's not. Even if Papahatsis never meant for people to take the story seriously, in today's internet age, it's tough to predict how people will react. They might end up believing in the tale of a person who traveled through time while in a coma. What are your thoughts on the story of this man who traveled to the year 3906? Let us have your opinions in the comments below.